Hello everybody. We return to Football Association Challenge Cup. The sponsors still haven't sent any tickets. Action, where we will be visiting National League North side Kidderminster Harriers. Note this is the FA Cup, despite Harriers' website billing the tie as a National League North match when last we looked. Things haven't got that bad here. We're not in the North just yet. Kick-off on Saturdays at 12:30 with live coverage on BBC One. Extra time and penalties will be available on the day to settle the tie if required. So, Kidderminster Harriers then. They currently sit in third place in the league following a 3-0 win over Leamington in midweek. That leaves them 4 points behind leaders Gateshead and second place Brackley Town, so they're nicely tucked in distance running terms. Their FA Cup run started in October 2021 with a win over Ware, who were finally put to bed 3-0 at Aggborough after a 1-1 draw in Hertfordshire. Bedfont Town were next to go, Harriers prevailing 1-0 in West London. Next they dispatched Grimsby Town 1-0 again at Aggborough in the first round proper. The clumsily named FC Halifax Town were next to visit Aggborough, returning back up to Yorkshire on the end of a 2-0 defeat. The third round of the Cup is the one where the TV companies get all gooey-eyed at the arrival of the top two divisions. Kidderminster must have had mixed feelings at drawing Reading, who fall into the disappointing category of cup draws, especially when Harriers went 1-0 down on the stroke of half-time. However, goals from Austin and Morgan Smith saw them through. Hammers with memories of the Biscuitmen's Muppet support will find a whole load of amusement to be had trawling through the various Reading forums in the aftermath of that result, though they hadn't quite made it around to blaming a lack of inflatables when last time I looked. Both Harriers' goals that day owed much to Cabal, the Reading keeper. Austin's shot went through Cabal like a dodgy curry after a night on the ale, and quite what happened for the second I have no idea. Daisy and I have sat down and watched it time and time again and still can't quite work out what happened. There's a tangle of arms and legs, the whole thing looking like one of those cartoon clouds with various limbs sticking out of them that are employed as comic book shorthand to indicate a fight's occurring. The next thing you know, Morgan Smith is running away in celebration towards the touchline, claiming the goal. Reading cried foul, but there again, Sodom. Daisy informs me that Morgan Smith is one of those players to whom it is a criminal offence to not apply the adjectival phrase much travelled. He's dabbled in the lower reaches of the league, starting off at Stockport in 2007-08, where they were in what I will call Division 3 for the rest of my life. He also played in the 4th Division with Cheltenham, having gained promotion with them to that level. This is his third spell with Harriers, if you count a loan spell that went permanent a few years back as 2 spells. He also has cap for the seldom mentioned outside this column England C team. Top goal scorer is Ashley Hemmings, who has 11 in the 26 matches he's played this season. He started out at Wolves and made 2 appearances in their promotion-winning side, gaining England under-17 caps along the way. However, despite being on the books at Molineux for a few more years, he never made it into the Premier League side, and he spent the bulk of his career in the 3rd and 4th divisions before alighting on the National Leagues. The keeper, on whom there will be much scrutiny, is 27-year-old Luke Simpson. He's had a large number of clubs without ever having played much for any of them. In the 8 years up to 2020, he'd made a mere 25 league appearances for the 11 clubs on whose books he'd been up to that point. However, he seems to have taken root, if that's not too dodgy a metaphor for a keeper, at Kidderminster, for whom he's amassed over 40 appearances since arriving. On the injury front, defenders Nathan Cameron and Joe Fawkes, the latter of whom is on loan from Walsall, both hope to play some part in proceedings, having recommenced training following injury. Midfielders Kezia Martin and striker Ethan Fremantle are both likely to miss out, however. And so let's move on to our look at the wide and wacky world of association football. And just when you thought our referees couldn't get any worse, they managed to do just that. And, as usual, Liverpool and Manchester United were the beneficiaries. I'll come to our game later, but those involved in the Palace versus Liverpool match should have been sitting down in front of an advisor at the local job centre first thing on Monday morning. The penalty awarded by Kevin Friend was simply unbelievable. It did look like a penalty the first time around at full speed, and with each replay it looked even less so. Anyone who gave that penalty, having had the benefit of VAR, really has no right to be earning a living as a referee at the highest level. The only thing Friend and Pawson should have been looking at was Jota's deliberate change of direction to cheat his way to a spot kick and digging out the yellow card that it subsequently deserved. It would have been nice to have heard Klopp being honest and dismissing the actions of his player, but that was never going to happen. After all, if he had to apologise for his players diving all the time, he wouldn't have time to tell everyone how wonderful he is. It was a disgusting decision from disgusting officials benefiting a disgusting club. Again. Meanwhile, talking of disgusting, Man United have gone one step further in their anything-you-can-do rivalry with Manchester City, as now both clubs have players out on bail. I think that situation is depressing enough without further comment from me on the subject. And so on to us. Another pointless window then. Now, the apologists for the board have been out in full force as the spin machine cranks into life, pointing out that we've tried to bring in players without success. However, the one word missing from that sentence is this: again. For example, it's now over a year and 3 windows since Seb Haller left us, leaving us effectively with just the one first-team striker on the book. Now, if in 3 windows the club hasn't been able to fill what even GSB's most ardent of supporters must surely concede is a rather worrying gap in the squad, then something must be wrong. As for the claims that record bids were submitted, such comments are potentially disingenuous for a number of reasons. Firstly, those involved have previous in the submission of the phantom bid, having been found out doing that in the past. Secondly, on the assumption that the bids were actually genuine, the boast of the record nature of those bids is rather meaningless if the bids fell well short of the value of the players involved. I mean, I've never paid more than about £15,000 for a car, so an offer of £20,000 for a brand new Aston Martin would genuinely be a record bid on my part. It would also be treated with the contempt it deserved. The board have certainly expended a lot of energy in defending their position over the past few days, with what appears to be favours being called in across a wide range of media, some of which have aimed at a lot of little snide digs at those who are unhappy with the current state of affairs. For my part, I can't imagine why anyone would be pleased at our continued failure to maintain a squad of sufficient depth to maintain a challenge in the various competitions we've worked so hard to get into. But clearly such people exist. On the pitch, if you can remember that far back, we were unlucky to come away from Old Trafford with nothing last time out, due to an injury time goal of a dubious nature. Again, I'd have had a lot more faith in the VAR system had they bothered to look at the screen for more than a microsecond. The self-justifying still that they showed to cover their backs appeared to have come a split second before the ball was played, rather than at the time the ball was played, as the law demands. And there was at least a suspicion that Rashford himself might have been ahead of the ball when it was played through to him. He might not have been, but frankly, if VAR isn't even going to bother to check just in case a Man United goal is disallowed, then what's the point in having it? As we saw earlier, it wasn't the worst abuse of VAR on the day. Someone surely must be looking at the role of PGMOL in presiding over the descent of English officiating into embarrassing levels and thinking, if only we had an organisation in charge of officials whose priority was improvement rather than covering up ineptitude. Well, if only there was someone other than me saying that. It is time that the FA stood up and accepted responsibility and took over from Riley and his cronies, as I believe FIFA regulations still require them to do. On the injury front, Noble is likely to have recovered from his knee problem. If so, expect a start for the skipper. Fabianski should have recovered from the brush with the C word that kept him out in Salford. Benrahma is back from the cuppa soup. Ogbonna continues in rehab, but thankfully Zuma is back to bolster the central defensive area. There's been another area of concern as far as squad depth is concerned. A worry for me is Antonio, who's played 3 internationals over the past week or so, suggesting that his definition of the phrase winter break needs a bit of working on. So let's talk about the lead-in to the prediction. Much will depend on our selection, though it shouldn't do. I'm not sure Mr. Moyes would totally agree with me, but I can see no reason why we shouldn't put out a strong team here, for a couple of reasons. Firstly, as an old git, I don't hold with this modern notion of making 10 changes every time you play a cup match. It just doesn't sit right with me. Secondly, whilst I'm happy that Mr. Moyes has instilled a more professional attitude amongst the squad during his tenure. There are one or two of the fringe players from whom I would have concerns over their approach to taking on what the papers often refer to as minnows. We've seen in the not too distant past the dangers of going all big time Charlie. AFC Wimbledon, anybody? Now I do appreciate we've got Watford on Tuesday, and Daisy's trying to keep track of all their signings as we speak. So one or two given another afternoon off would be acceptable, I suppose. Perhaps leaving out Antonio might be wise given his exertions. If those hamstrings go, we wouldn't be able to bring in any of those players we tried to sign to replace him. As mentioned, any starting 11 we put out should be capable of putting a Division 6 side to the sword. This is the Cup, however, and as Reading found out, players will put themselves about a bit, so the right attitude is everything. I'm still going to go for us for a win on the basis of the relative strengths of the two sides on paper, but with a due sense of foreboding instilled by over 50 years of watching this lot. So the £2.50 I was going to offer for that Aston Martin will instead go on an away win. Make it 3-0 to us if you please, Mr. Winston, and enjoy the game, everybody.
So we're here in the offices of a Late Late Show with the host of a Late Late Show, James Corden.
Hi.
Big West Ham fan.
Yes. And big knees up Mother Brown, man.
Yeah.
Get on the forum at kumb.com. Come on, you irons.